Good morning and good afternoon, LinkedIn friends, HubSpot Nation. Welcome to another episode of Let's Build a HubSpot Super Admin with Lucila Abal. How you doing today, Lucy?
Hey, Chris. Good morning. Happy to see you again.
You as well. What is this, week 5 of the Super Admin Bootcamp?
Yes, almost last week of the last Super Admin Bootcamp of the year. Um, and yeah, a lot of interesting learnings and discoveries this week with our attendees that we are happy to share with you.
Around automation, I hear. And this is interesting timing. I love how all of this content ends up working together. Yesterday, I was talking to Zach Hushin about basically the importance of process over platform. Companies, teams, individuals invest in HubSpot and they're like, let's just get in there. Let's get in there and start doing stuff. Can we just start onboarding and then we'll figure it out as we go? And then, like we all know, a lot of us know that it doesn't work out very well when you do it that way. And a lot of it has to do with, some automation that just comes ready-made out of the box. But also, if you get to, so what I'm learning as I start to coach more people, there's a good way and a bad way to do in process, like building. Like if you set the expectation up front that we have some ideas of how we want it to go and in HubSpot, but we know that if we wait a little bit and we know that when we get in there and start doing it, stuff might change. We want to be flexible, and that will help us figure it out. That is, for me, a good way to start to implement things because you learn a lot about people's process as you get in and you watch it start happening. But the flip side of that is if you don't set that expectation up front and we don't even talk about it, and then we're in it, and then we start thinking about how our process should go and what things should be named and what makes sense. Then you just go down this rabbit hole of having conversations that probably aren't super productive. But when it comes to automation, that's one of those places where it's super powerful, and a lot of what you're invested in for HubSpot is to get to this point. But what are you finding out there as far as what are people getting the most out of already, and where are the knowledge gaps that you're seeing when you do the boot camp?
Yeah, so the first thing that I can tell you is that, of course, we always say you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't know what is native automation in HubSpot, you're missing a big part. And we have a funny categorization internally here at Tandemol, that is, we call them invisible automations, because these are already built in HubSpot, things that you don't need to set up. You just tick them and choose them on or off. The main thing about that is that people usually don't know that exist or don't know that they are actually automations, and they do a lot of things in the back end of the CRM. The second thing is that especially clients that are first timers with CRM, so that they haven't have a proper definition of their own business processes and they're just trying to start to implement a CRM. They don't have the clear definition of a lot of things, so sometimes guided by the wrong partners or sometimes trying to do them by themselves, they tend to ignore these things and they go fully trying to do custom automations all the way, and they forget that there are some basic native stuffs in HubSpot that you should have started with, and only when that wasn't enough or that was tested and that you have learned that that wasn't the type of need that your business had, you should have gone custom. And we can give some examples for people hearing us to understand what we're talking about. So we have a lot of these invisible automations that are, for example, at the contact level, Whenever you create a contact, you can decide in which lifecycle stage do you want them to be created. Or, for example, when you are closing a deal, you have an associated deal that is closing and you close it one, you can set up that this contact has become a customer, right? You have, for example, another one that is regarding the domain of the contact email. You can automatically create that company and automatically associate with that company in the CRM. All of those are examples of automations that you just choose if you want that to happen or not in the CRM, and the CRM is going to do it by themselves, right? Imagine it's like having an agent is having someone, an internal mouse already doing that in the back, right? And
Yep.
those are not perceived as automations because you're not creating a workflow to do that. What usually happens with clients is they ignore that part and they go and create workflows by themselves, but again, not knowing that this part exists, and they're always overwriting and overstepping this default setup by HubSpot with workflows. And this usually generates a lot of conflict internally of overwriting of information. Of course, in the end, trash information, trash data that is not aligned, that is always changing, and they don't understand why. So first, you need to understand, even if you're leaving these native automations on or off because your business needs. And then if you're turning that off, then you go and create the workflows, right? Another examples of invisible automations are when you set up an email to be sending the newsletter of your blog post. That is an automation. It's just that you said it once. You said, hey, I want to send this email with the blog post of my blog. Just send it weekly, monthly, whatever frequency you want. You set it up once, and then that email goes individually each week or each month. You don't have to be doing it every time. The same thing with surveys, with NPS. So those are the type of invisible automations. And that's the main issue that I see. People don't know that this exists. They don't pay attention of this. And they usually commit the same mistake, that is going to create the visible automations that are the workflows, overwriting all of this. And
Yeah.
that's a really huge mistake.
Yeah. Well, it's I love the distinction between native and like custom. That I'm often really focused on that because when you leverage native tooling, you get to enjoy when HubSpot develops more better like process and functionality related to the native tools involved in that process. Like,
Yes.
So it's important to leverage that when you can. I think as you're talking about it, it's basically the whole setting. A lot of the settings area of HubSpot
Yes.
is activating or deactivating a lot of that native automation. I think this is what I've never thought about it like this before, but this is why it's different to have a CRM inside of a marketing automation platform, because automation is built into the DNA of the platform. It's trying to do a lot of that for you so that you don't have to go to workflows for everything, where systems like Salesforce or ERPs they're built to just everything is from scratch. You do have to build any kind of automation, even if it's moving this little piece of data, over to here. We're changing from, opportunity to customer. It's like, well, it's not going to do that out of the box, but here's this little automation that you got to set up, right? So that's one of the places where we see, the difference between native and not, and configuration versus customization, right? It's understandable why, if you're used to doing this outside of HubSpot, people just go like, where's the workflows tool? Where, like, just show me where that is. I know exactly how I'm going to set stuff up. Meanwhile, you're missing out on so much that is already, out of the box set up for you. But it's not just because it's out of the box, right? It's like HubSpot moves so fast, and as they develop stuff, I think what's happening with the mapping visualizations right now is a great example of where if you didn't like the out of the box automation of see domain, create company record, and you actually needed 50 locations related to that company record, and you didn't want to figure out association labels, for example, so you make your own object. Now you don't get to enjoy the mapping visualization, which could be really powerful for all of those location focused records in your CRM. And that's often an example I like to use to say, okay, in these situations, that out of the box native automation is when you turn that off, because domains are not going to create the kind of records that you want, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely, we come back to understand your business processes so that you can understand the system that you're trying to execute inside of, right?
Yeah, and exactly. And we always tell them that, we always tell everyone, the attendees at the bootcamp and our clients, is that you need to have business conversations first. This is not something that an admin decides or chooses to tick on, tick off, because this is much more bigger than just that section. And it's funny, and I can understand that the confusion is real and that people don't really see all of these native automation as automation itself. The first reason is because HubSpot doesn't even call it the same thing, doesn't even put the same title in the section among different objects. If you go to contacts, if you go to companies, if you go to lead, it's not called automation. If you go to deals, it's not called automation. So they have even used different names to name the same section of the setting that actually speak about doing native automation in the back. So I can understand the confusion is real. I can feel you. I know. But that doesn't mean that this is not automation in the back. And as you were saying, Chris, of course, your business, HubSpot is a pre-made product. Of course, HubSpot has a lot of information. They have developed focus groups. They have built all of these native setups based on experience or on investigation. So if they are proposing this, there's a reason why they think this should be that way as the standard way. But again, that doesn't mean that your business needs to adapt to that. You need to choose that, or to turn it on and off and set it up for your business. But as you were saying, we always encourage people to try to leverage as much as possible all native features of HubSpot. Of course, we have a lot of clients from SaaS that they almost never go with the traditional data model in HubSpot. So a lot of these automations, we cannot use them and we cannot take advantage of them. That doesn't mean that we're not creating the same stuff, of course, with specific workflows or with coded actions. Yes, of course. But choosing that feature and put it on and off, take it on and off, doesn't mean that you're not doing that. It's just you're doing it in another section. So the first step would be check if you can take advantage of that. And then if not, you can replicate that your way in a workflow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's dig into that, because I think, and we'll call this section the why of automation, because I think people can get that wrong very easily. Is if you start to automate for the wrong reasons, for example, like, oh, our sales team can't be spending time on that, right? So let's, from a basic level, like, why do we want to automate certain things?
Well, I think that the first, and the same thing applies as we're talking about automation and we're moving towards an AI first world. It applies the same concept. Is this going to save time of the team? Is this going to improve performance or efficiency? Is this something that is valuable to be scalable at a time? And is it worth it, the time that we are going to be dedicating, the time and effort to set this up? Because the first mistake that we see is people trying to automate something that you're going to be doing once in a lifetime just because you don't want to be doing it. And it's not a frequent, repetitive thing to do. It's not scalable. So that's the first problem. So you're generating workflows for anything. Hey, I don't want to be moving this from here to here, but I only have 5 records with that. Why are you creating an automation? Just do it faster if you're clicking the 5 and that's it. So that's one of the first mistakes. The second mistake is creating things that nobody cares. For example, tasks for the sales team. The sales team don't want tasks. They are not paying attention of tasks. Tasks are dying in the task area, overdue and unseen. Why did you create a workflow to be doing that? Did the sales team ask you to be doing that? The sales manager? Is someone monitoring that the tasks have been done or not? If the answer is no, you don't need that automation, right? That's useless. You're just generating trash in the CRM. And the first thing that people need to understand is that automation, and we always said this, and I think we have discussed this before with you, automation is only going to amplify the result of the action, meaning if it's a good thing, we're going to get better results. If it's a bad thing, we're going to get mess everywhere, right? So trash in, multiple trash out everywhere. And the cost of doing that then is super high, because then needing the time and effort to go and fix all the data in the CRM that got mixed up or that got wrongly set up with a workflow that shouldn't have been a workflow, that's super complicated. We still don't have an undo button for workflows just to go time back and undo everything that we did. So we still need to be super careful about what we're doing. But I'm not saying that you shouldn't be using workflows. It's just that we need to be conscious about how we are using them, right?
Yeah. And I think this is where I'm still working through how to best present this to people who are used to using, systems like spreadsheets. And we say it's going to save you time to use a system like HubSpot. And then if you're used to using spreadsheets, you're just like, all right, next line, typing everything in. It goes so fast. Right now, I've got to go into a contact, and then I've got to do a company too and a deal. Like, this feels like way harder. So many more clicks, and they're right in that moment, right? But where the time is saved is all everything else that you're saying that you want to do. That if you were to continue doing this in the spreadsheet, it's like, all right, you're creating another tab, and now you got to bring everything into PowerPoint and like all these other things that happen after that point of data entry, right? This is why taking a minute to, and associations are my favorite example of right now, like we understand
invisible automations.
Yeah, we understand the complexity. There's more than one person involved, like in sales most of the time. And how do we move out of like one company, one contact, per deal? It feels like a lot of work to say, okay, this is our buying contact. This is the decision maker. This is the influencer, right? We know how valuable it is to understand that, but our sales team can't be spending time messing with associations.
Yes.
It's like, well, if you can't manually show me the process and show me how you want the record to look, right? We're going to have a very hard time automating that for you. In that point, so it's like, where are we saving time? Like, if the sales team can spend a little bit of time up front, because I'm coming from a place of like, if there's anything your team should be doing manually, it is making sure record associations are correct, because it activates everything else in HubSpot. And that's where you start to save time, like making sure that the right people get the right email with the right message at the right time.
Yeah.
right, is based on HubSpot and now AI in a lot of cases, understanding the relationship between those two things. And when we can talk about it in that way, it's like, oh, if we can just do this part a little bit manual, like now the sales team or whoever else will save this much time in these other spaces that are also really important, for the business. So really digging into the why behind automating or not. Because
Yes.
by the way, at least if I were managing a sales team, like I need my team to know the relationships that are involved. So if that stuff is happening in an automated way, it becomes very easy for the teams to miss that kind of understanding because the system is taking care of that part for me, right?
Yes. Well, I have like, we can see it in a two-way, because there's always two sides of the story. So regarding sales teams, of course, they don't usually like to be inputting information into the CRM because they're not data entries, they're salespeople. Okay, I can understand that. But on one side, they need to be responsible of the information that they are putting in the CRM, right? Okay, there are some things then that we can assume, let's just say, I hate the word, but let's just try to use assume for the moment. That we can assume, for example, if they have already prospect that company, okay, they didn't complete the company type, okay, they didn't update the lifecycle stage or lifecycle stage wasn't automated or whatever, okay. But if that company ends up having an open associated deal, okay, we can say that they have done all that process in the middle of qualifying in a way that company. So we could have an automation trying to fix, okay, if company type is not completed, but there is an open deal that is moving forward, okay, we can assume that this is a prospect. We can try to complete or enrich the information of the industry if this is not complete. So right now we have a lot of more automation, especially related to AI, that we can take advantage of. For example, I have a discussion this week about, well, we were talking about attribution, right? But they were wanting to move information that was part of the original source of the contact all the way up to the company and to the deal. And the way they used to do that was creating three properties and having a workflow to copy the value of the contact into the company and the deal. Okay, maybe like 5 years ago, that was okay. That was the only way that we could do it in HubSpot. But today, the first thing that I ask them is, okay, but what is the source of that information? Oh, no, it's always going to be the contact. Okay, but are you changing the value in the company or at the deal level? No, I think we're sticking with the contact. Right? Okay, so it's a property sync. Another type of invisible automation, a property sync, a new type of properties that we have from, I don't know, a year already, or almost a year.
A year and a half,
A
actually,
year
if
and
you
a
can
half,
imagine.
okay.
Yeah. That was the first
Okay,
show, by the way, that was the first show of Let's Build I ever did, was
amazing.
let's just look at sync, property sync right now. Yeah, so always a
Okay,
special
so
place in my heart, that
but
one.
property sync replaced a lot of workflows that people used to build to copy information from one place to the other one. And the only reason for copying that, okay, you need to report, okay, associations were not quite where we are today. So again, you couldn't see maybe information of a property that was in another object. And that's still a challenge because you can't go more than one level of association. So that's kind of complicated still in the CRM. But the property sync was super easy when you know where is the source of information. So if you're not setting that property value once and again and again and again, it's obvious that you need to do just a property sync. You just need to visualize the value in another object, but not changing the value of that property. And actually, this week in the bootcamp, people didn't realize that. And they said, oh, That's right. I can replace a lot of workflows that we used to had about that. Yeah, that's the idea. That's the idea. Don't have workflows that are no longer in use so that you could replace with something easier. And actually, that is going to be better because we know that every user in the CRM always has the temptation of touching the properties and the values. So that's always also creating a mess when you're thinking about reports because you start to have inconsistent data.
Right.
Because if the source or whatever property needs to be the same in three different objects, if you're touching it, then it's not going to be the same.
Yeah. And I see that like when we start with the why, like
Yeah.
save time is one, but also performance and efficiency is like a big category. And part of
Yeah.
that is like the standardization, like of
And
your
data
data,
accuracy.
right?
Yes.
Like if you need the data to be standardized, there are lots of ways to do that.
Yes.
And you just have to work hard to make sure it's getting standardized for the right reasons and in the right places. And an example of where this goes wrong, especially when integrations get involved. And it's like, well, we've got to standardize for the integration. Like, this is how this system calls it. So we're going to call it that. And we're going to stay consistent. It's like, well, the team using this system, that doesn't make any sense to them. Right.
Yeah.
So we've got to figure out, like, that's a situation where we do have tools in HubSpot where we're getting to standardization, but we're using automation to transform it into the way that the other team needs it, right? So that is really this powerful layer. A lot of what Data Hub and all the data management tools are meant to do things exactly like that for you and your team. You just have to understand very clearly, and most of the best admins I know are used to doing this. It's like you bring up a record view with the user and you're looking at each part of the screen. Where do they want the data? How do they want to see it? Because what was interesting when sync properties came out, at around the same time, the ability to look at association data on the same record came out as well, right? So you start to say, like, if my team just needs to see it in this place, I might not even need to move the data over. I
Exactly.
can just reveal it from this other object,
Exactly.
right? And it's a lot of nuance, right? So we went from just having like workflows to kind of copy data around to all of a sudden, like
Yeah.
any way you want it, you can present data. And what we try to do is, like, the more data that place, the more places that data exists, just the maintenance starts to like get exponential in terms of the amount of work, where even AI is not going to be able to, help make sense of it all before it just suggests, like, do we really need, the data in all these places?
Yeah, and I think that you got the point because part of the why of automation is, well, it's actually related to what are you using it for? Because you did a great example. If you just need to visualize it to get things going in your work, or I don't know, as a trigger, as context, either way, that's one thing. If you need to report on it, that's one reason of why you should have it in another object. Because it's different. Visualization is one thing, and then reporting is another thing, right? And people tend to confuse that and try to do everything everywhere, and that's where the CRM gets messy. And I want to tell a funny story that happened this week. We have a complex SaaS customer that has a very big data model. And now they are trying to implement a new tool for partners that is about gamification for the partners and all that stuff. The source of truth is HubSpot. So we have been building in the past 5 months a very robust data model and data structure. And the other day we had a meeting with the product team of this other tool that I'm not going to mention, but then we can tell people in LinkedIn, in the post, if they're curious about that. They said, the product manager said, oh, I really don't like working with HubSpot. Data model is so complicated. I really prefer working with Salesforce platforms that are easier to structure. Why the comment? Because they don't handle custom objects. They only work with the standard objects in HubSpot. And come on, guys, it's 2025. Who on earth is just working with only the native objects of HubSpot? Who still works only with contact and company? I think I would like to know this about this information from HubSpot, and I will try to know this when I'm going to Grow event in a couple of weeks. But I think it should be less than 50% of users are still using only the standard objects, because businesses get more complex, and the more you can have in HubSpot, the more you want in HubSpot. So the more possibilities of having custom objects start arising, right? So again, automation is going to help you keep everything aligned, keep everything in order. When we're talking about data accuracy and standardization, you have both sides with workflows. You can either use workflows to help that information be cleaned up, be organized, be standardized. But have in mind that if you're not using clean information for all other processes that you want to automate, you're not going to get good results. So using workflows for first to organize the data in your CRM, I think that is a priority. That should be the first usage that you have of workflows. And it's funny because when we ask the students at the bootcamp, what do you think automations are for? The first thing that they say is nurturing.
Yes.
Okay, well, okay, A for effort, but the first thing is that people think that automation is for marketing. We need to say that, okay, when HubSpot created Marketing Hub, automations was first associated to Marketing Hub. But today, I don't know if people know, but automations is something that is cross-hub, meaning you have automations in every hub. In a different way, yes, with more and less features, yes, but you still have automation for all the hubs. So I can understand why people from the old time, from the beginning of marketing, I think, and from email marketing, think that automation is a synonym of email marketing. But today, 2025, again, that's not accurate. That's not enough. So first you have internal automations that are not client-facing and they just remain inside your organization. And part of those are the ones that we were mentioning: data cleanup, associations, a lot of things, right? And a lot of also today breeze actions that we can use to categorize ICP, market research, a lot of cool stuff that we have. And the other part is client facing, doing nurturing, sending, onboarding. If you are just having a new customer and you want to do the onboarding process. So there's a lot of things that we could be doing with automation that is not only marketing related, right?
Yeah.
And
that's where I like to, it becomes, I do not suggest trying to separate data management and maintenance and just being data literate from automation, right? Like when we go to these marketing use cases, like there was a day where HubSpot just handled a lot of that. But as Lucy says, like we're doing more now. And for me, in the traditional, like my favorite definition of marketing is every two-way communication that your business has with customers. Like if that's actually how you think about marketing in your business, like, yeah, the marketing team and the people, if like the best loop marketing practitioners right now are the situations where marketing as an organization owns all of the internal and external communications that are happening in the business, right? But to make it easier to understand, like, and not, you don't need to be a data scientist, right, to be able to activate automation. But I do think it's important to break it down into three categories of what HubSpot can do with data. And that's, it can create data, right? In the case of, contact fills out a form, and based on the domain company record, like, it's created, right? It's very simple automation. It can maintain data, right? And that would be, deal closes, moves from opportunity lifecycle stage to customer lifecycle stage, right? That's helping to maintain data to accurately represent what is happening in that situation. But then communicating it, right, is the third bucket. And that's where it's like reporting, dashboards, notifying people internally and externally of things, like nurturing, all that stuff. And that's where HubSpot is almost always the best option for any business, right? It doesn't mean you have to do the creation and the maintenance there, but if you can get the data into HubSpot, it's going to make it easiest to communicate that data, right? And that's where, if you don't understand the data model, that you can put order information into HubSpot, like you can do service in HubSpot, right? You think you still have to use these other systems to communicate out to customers, like the whole conversation between transactional emails and marketing emails and all these different things. It's like, no, it's communication. And if we can get it into HubSpot, automation of the communications are almost always the biggest gap in terms of what could be better, like with our customer experience, both internally and externally, right? So that's how I like to break down, like, I've never done it in terms of automation, but for me, that's where this fits in terms of the what, right, of this conversation. And understanding those three buckets can make it very clear on kind of what kind of automation you will apply to it. And also, I think it gets us to the when, right? If it comes over from another system and it's already ready to go, right? Versus, do we have to use Data Hub to manipulate, transform, like do something to the data, right, before it changes? Do we have to do that right when it comes in? And et cetera. So when you think about the when, I don't know, is that too general of a bucket? And we need some actual use cases, or like what are the different, I guess, kinds of when for you when you think about automating in HubSpot?
Well, I think that maybe the first thing that comes in mind when we think about when is volume, right? And it's not why, it's when. Coming back to the example that I mentioned at the beginning, is that if you're just doing this for 5 records and that's it, you don't need an automation for that. When you're doing this for 500 or for 5,000, or you're doing this once an hour, and that is taking a lot of time of the team, I think that is the moment when you realize that this should be automated, right? So, of course, we are always talking about repetitive tasks, and not tasks in the HubSpot meaning of a task, things that we do or things that need to be processed. And sometimes the CRM also is not enough and it crashes, because coming back to this example of this complex SaaS client I was telling you, last week we needed to update more than 25,000 records, of course, with all of its associations, and we're talking about more than 5 objects associated to those 21,000 records. So the amount of information that we were trying to run was like super big, and of course it crashed. It gave an error. That's it, because it was such a big amount of information. So then we had to keep putting things in order so that it doesn't keep crashing, and everything is sorted out now. But again, it was because of volume. If I had to put someone to update 25,000 records with a lot of properties in it, with more than 5 objects associated with its own properties, do you know how much time we would have been doing this? And I'm not talking about Christmas. I'm talking about Christmas when I'm 90 years old, because physically I wouldn't have had that time to do it. And I think it's the same concept again when we're thinking about AI, trying to achieve something that a human wouldn't achieve in normal regular time, right? And actually, if you think about AI is automation, but of course with a cherry on top, saying about intelligence and autonomy, and ideally being proactive and being able to do more stuff, not only the ones that we are telling it to do. But it's the same thing, it's the same concept. It runs over the main heart or idea, right? So I think that is the when moment, right? Of course, nobody cares about that, and everyone goes and do it whenever they want, whenever they need, whenever someone tells them. And I think the result of that is having more than 500 workflows that they don't run, they have errors, nobody is taking a look at it anymore. The worst thing that we see is people setting workflows and forgetting that they exist. Nobody auditing those workflows, nobody going to the same thing with integrations. Once an integration is set up, no one goes again to see the
It's done.
setup. No one goes to see if the sync is giving errors, if a property is showing inconsistencies in the values. We need to change the mindset of people of setting things once and forgetting. Of course, HubSpot is getting better at it, giving us a lot of dashboards of control, of analysis. As admins, we have a lot of new cool features. Now, actually, Workflows has 2 new sections that we can go and see. So we have the tools, but we have to change the mindset that is something that we're setting once and we are forgetting, because the information in the CRM is changing also. We need sometimes to add different property values. We change the way that we think that things should be associated, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that's how I like to think about the when, because what we see is
whenever I
like,
want.
well, also like, okay, the integration doesn't work. We don't know how it's set up, so we're just going to create a bunch of automation to make up for how the integration really wasn't built for what we needed to do, and now we're automating the solutions for all the symptoms that are coming out. And maybe if we automated up front, right, when it's coming in, this is where the way that Data Hub and Data Studio is being built out, like, people have used things like data lakes and data warehouses that are separate from any system, and you got to send all the data there because it's literally too complex to just move data from system to system, because we have different teams calling things differently. Got to find a way to standardize. There are other moments when if you automate in the right spot, now the maintenance you have, like, you just don't have to do it anymore. And a recent example I've had, again, we come back to understanding the process, right? Like, if I want to have an order, let's say I want to do an order confirmation, and I know at some point the invoice needs to be built based on what's happening in the order. But for various reasons, I don't want the data on the order and the data on the invoice always in sync, right?
Yeah.
So, when we built it out first, right, and this gets really organizationally dependent how your business operates, right? If you don't invoice right up front and things happen with the order and it ships out and you're changing charges here and there, like, to make sure that the right things get invoiced. If you create the invoice at the time of the order creation, right, and these aren't syncing objects, you'll be making changes on the order, and then you'll have to make the same changes on the invoice, right? Versus, okay, now we get to shipping stage. let's automate the invoice now, right? Because then we won't have to maintain the data in both places, right? So this is the power of pipelines in HubSpot too, by the way. Like pipelines, getting those right, and why I focus on them so much, streamlines so much of the automation that people want, because it very clearly visually represents the when of everything that's happening in the CRM. And it's pipelines and associations, right, folks? If you get those right, it's just a lot of the automation and understanding by the team of what's automating and when just gets dramatically easier.
And I think that process is something that people don't have in mind when they're thinking about workflows. And for example, something that came up this week in the bootcamp was that nobody tends to think workflows with a specific goal. Yeah, just because a workflow can do 500 actions, that doesn't mean that you can put all of the things that you think this workflow can solve in one shot in one workflow. So workflows are workflows, meaning there's a process, there's some steps that need to happen, there's one trigger. Why do we have multiple triggers in a workflow? What do you think? Because these are not meant to be doing multiple things at a time. These are meant to be solving one thing, one goal at a time. So when people start, you can have the two opposed sins in workflows. One action workflows, it's just, okay, if this, do this. Okay, well, it's not the worst scenario that I have seen. Yeah, maybe this shouldn't be a workflow. Okay, but well, let's just leave those at peace now. And the opposite side is like 500 action workflows with no guidance, with no clear path of what the process, what the goal was of this workflow, of having different if-thens, 1 million, and changing things and using different lists with different criteria in them. And also, okay, this is a mess. If you cannot understand what the workflow is doing, this is not right. And then, of course, optimizing that's a whole new story. Another moment that you made me realize of when people think about automation is when the reports don't give the results that they wanted to see. How can we fix it? They say. Can we use automation to fix it? Okay, now wait a minute. That is the other when moment that we hear. Okay, when should we use it? And no, that's not the way. Even though we can use workflows, as we said before, to fix information, to help the reports give better results or better, more accurate information. Automation should not be the only main reason you're using it. So you should have built your automation to help the flow go correctly, let's just say, on the right path for you to arrive at those reports, meaning reports at the beginning and the end of the story. When you have in mind the report that you need to achieve, you start building backwards all the steps that you need to do to achieve that goal. It's not just because the report wasn't what I expected, now I go and do all the stuff. It's not the beginning. Okay, yes, it's the beginning and the end, but it's because we get feedback from the reports. Not because the main purpose is not giving the information or the results that I want. Let's just fix it with workflows. So that's it. Those are the main reasons when we see that a portal is not well implemented. All those are the symptoms. All those are the things that we hear people say, and all those are the when they think that they should be using automation, right?
And I think that reporting example is a good example. Like that's the difference between data transformation and data manipulation. Yes, right? Exactly. Like if you're at the report,
manipulating reports,
right, and you want to tell a certain story, like that's the power and responsibility of HubSpot. You can probably do that. We can make data tell whatever story we want. But that's an immediate red flag for us if that's when you're deciding that automation needs to happen, because there's usually something else along the line that should be changing instead. And ultimately, those are the things where even if the leadership wants it to look a certain way, but then your users see that and they know inherently that it's not telling, the right story. Like maybe automation got you to this one result, but what that's going to harm the rest of the system, right? And it snowballs really quickly because people start using it less, they start trusting it less. Now we have more data maintenance and we apply more automation, and it's just a recipe, for disaster, because now we're expecting AI to come in and understand what's happening, right? And all of that stuff we just described is very unnatural data management, because we're trying to tell a story different from what actually is the truth, and that's going to confuse AI every single time, right? So I do look forward. I'm glad you brought up the data model stuff, because and I look forward to what you're hearing from the Grow event. When is that Grow event?
In 2 weeks, November 11. So I think we will catch up after the event.
Yes, a couple days after. Yes. So very cool, because I am finding new ways to talk about the data model that can really, like, data model and lifecycle stages. If you can simplify there, it just sets a really good foundation for what HubSpot can be doing for your organization. That's what I've found. Like when people don't understand all the other objects and they still think it's contacts, companies, and deals, it's because they only see HubSpot as the marketing and sales system, right? When in reality, this is where if we could just get everybody to understand what customer platform means, then everything would be easier. We're never going to get there, because I don't think it's going to catch on as a category.
We will get there. Yeah.
Well, CRM is just too easy. Everybody says they know what that is, even though debatable. But yeah, it's all makes it easier to implement AI, but also help the humans do things with each other and with AI, so that we're not having to define what the word means in every process around every corner, right?
Yeah, PS to our last session that we discussed about creating properties and the AI new pop-up that appeared there. There was later on a post about, I hate this. I need to close it every time that I'm creating a property. I'm getting fed up of seeing this. Can I have a turn off button to disable this? Of course, who was it? A partner. Yeah. And I told him, hey, have you tried working directly from the data model and creating the property there? You get better visibility. You don't have to be closing that window anymore. No, but I don't really see the purpose. So there was kind of a long discussion of who on HubSpot invented this. Can we speak to the product? And said, hey, wait a minute. This is not meant for you. This is meant for customers, to avoid problems, to avoid duplication, to have an AI assistant when they are needing to define or polish a property. So this is a good thing. Just because you don't like it because of your role, this doesn't mean it's not valuable for the tool. So coming back to our last session that we were discussing about that.
Right. Because just yesterday I saw a post about, interested product of interest, product interest. We've all seen those properties, and that's because HubSpot, and we want HubSpot, I think, to make it easy enough to say, hey, this is important to my business. I need a place for this data right now as I'm building out the system. And creation of properties does make that very easy. Unless you can fit AI as a layer in, and that's how they're doing it, where you just tell AI what you want to make, it's going to highlight, hey, that property, I think that property might already exist, right? Maybe that's the one you want. Otherwise, we're going to run into the other times Like literally both of those posts are I had mentioned that case on the other post because the same partners, the same consultants will tell lots of horror stories about the duplication of properties specifically. And if you want to prevent that, this is how the team is doing that.
And we haven't even talked about attribution.
Yeah.
Because the main problem with attribution is people creating multiple custom properties to try to do attribution. And again, forgetting about the native ones, the HubSpot standard ones, that
Yep.
they have become much better. And we have a lot of new options there. So, yeah, I think next time we can explore a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, excited that you get to go to that event. Excited to see HubSpot kind of branching out, continuing to branch out outside of inbound to
Yes.
spread as like regionally and throughout the year, right? Because they move at the pace of daily and weekly right now. So that helps us all keep up and just being able to talk to each other about what's going on in the ecosystem and in the product and how customers are using is super awesome that they're making that easier. So I'll be excited to review what's up there with you next time and maybe dig into the data model a little bit.
Sure thing.
So thanks so much, Lucy. Any final thoughts for today's topic?
Just think about it twice.
Yes.
That's going to be.
Yes. Measure
I'm
twice.
just gonna
Cut
leave it
once.
there.
Yes, I like it. Well, until next time, we thank you and thank you, Lucy, for joining us today. And everybody have a great rest of your week. See you
Thank
next time.
you. See you next time. Bye bye.